Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're stepping into some seriously provocative territory. We're going to analyze a highly controversial corporate pitch from GNPNG Publishing Group, or GNPNG for short, and their flagship text, which is deliberately titled The Big Book of Hate Facts. Now, I want to be perfectly clear right up front. The material we're looking at today is explicitly designed to make you uncomfortable. Our goal here isn't to validate or debunk their claims, but to neutrally dissect exactly how this brand constructs its arguments and how they weaponize raw data to challenge modern consensus. To keep things completely objective, we're going to break this pitch down into 5 main areas: the satire insurgency, the target demographic, the anatomy of a hate fact, and then 2 specific case studies: obsolete sharks and subversive biology. Right out of the gate, this brand sets an incredibly aggressive tone. In their manifesto, they frame themselves not as your standard run-of-the-mill publisher, but as a full-blown insurgency. They state outright that their mission is to dismantle what they call scientism, which they view as the institutional gatekeeping of information. As their manifesto puts it, and I'll quote them directly here, "We don't care about your feelings. We care about the machinery of the universe." They want to bypass academic bureaucracies entirely and just deliver raw, unvarnished reality straight to you. So how does this abstract ethos look in reality? Well, it takes the form of a physical coffee table book. They claim to be pioneering a totally new genre that they call satire. It's basically science-based satire, but with a pretty brutal twist. The whole premise is that the provocative title of a chapter is the joke, but the actual peer-reviewed scientific citation, that's the punchline. It's a wildly fascinating, definitely aggressive way to package data.
All right, let's get into Section 1, the satire insurgency and dismantling scientism.
Their manifesto lays out 4 core brand pillars. First up, an absolute grounding in primary, verifiable data. They claim to curate, not speculate. Second is the subversion of consensus. This means they actively hunt for facts that trigger institutional corrections. Third, and this is a big one, is a strategy they call pedagogical aggression. They genuinely argue that the visceral discomfort of socially inconvenient data is actually the best teacher. And finally, institutional sabotage. By delivering this data directly to the consumer, they want to render traditional gatekeepers completely obsolete. Moving right along to Section 2, the target demographic. Who exactly are they selling this radioactive material to? The pitch identifies a massive, totally untapped market of what they provocatively call university-educated assholes. I know, quite the term. They contrast this target reader sharply against what they call the institutional drone, basically compliant consumers who rely on sanitized, HR-approved infographics. But the GNPNG reader, they're described as a high IQ cynic, someone who values raw data and p-values and who actively seeks out the edge of forbidden truth just to use it as a daring conversation starter. That brings us to Section 3, Anatomy of a Hate Fact. Let's look at their 3-step formula. This strict, brutal formula is literally the engine of their entire brand. Step 1, make a highly provocative, even offensive claim. Step 2, back it up with a cold, mechanistic, biological, or neurological explanation. And Step 3, drop a verifiable, peer-reviewed primary citation to totally corner the reader. They're basically building an intellectual trap. If you want to deny the offensive claim, you're forced to deny the foundational science. Let's see this formula in action with Section 4, Case Study: Obsolete Sharks and the Orca Takeover. The pitch starts off with a big number, 250,000. Based on genetic bottleneck data from Hammerhead and Mako genomes, shark populations crashed hard about 250,000 years ago. And the pitch points out a pretty fascinating coincidence. This happened exactly when dolphins experienced a massive brain expansion and orcas diversified into specialized ecotypes. To really drive home the mechanistic reality of this, they highlight some brutal primary data from our modern oceans. They cite a documented event in South Africa where just 2 orcas, you might actually know them, port and starboard, slaughtered 19 great white sharks in a single day. 19. And they surgically ate only the livers, just leaving the carcasses behind. And it gets crazier when you look at the psychological impact. The mere presence of a single orca off the Farallon Islands caused tagged great white sharks to dive 1,500 feet and immediately abandon their territory. One tagged shark literally fled 2,342 miles all the way to Hawaii and didn't come back for an entire year. So here is the satire punchline. The brand uses this rapid-fire data to completely dismantle the myth of the endangered apex shark. They argue that sharks have exactly one hunting strategy. They bite. But orcas? They are a highly intelligent social mammal that evolved 5 distinct, culturally transmitted killing strategies in just 250,000 years. Their conclusion is that sharks aren't being threatened by humans, they're just an obsolete biological technology being outcompeted by mammals. It really shows how effectively they can flip an environmental narrative totally upside down using raw data.
Now for our final section, Section 5, Subversive Biology, looking at polar bears and beyond.
To keep things absolutely neutral as we dive into this one, we first need to understand the core biological mechanism the pitch relies on here, gene flow. Simply put, gene flow is just the transfer of genetic material from one population to another, usually through interbreeding at the edges of their respective territories. The pitch points to data mapping out bear interbreeding zones, showing that polar bears diverged from grizzlies roughly 300,000 to 500,000 years ago. And because they're still so incredibly close genetically, they actually produce fertile hybrids in the wild right now. You might have heard them called Pizzly or Growler bears. Using this exact data, the publisher makes the highly provocative claim that polar bears are essentially just grizzlies that turned white to adapt to hunting on the ice. They point out that white fur is a completely natural recurring variant in bear populations, like the Kermode spirit bears. So their argument is that if receding ice causes polar bears to interbreed back into the brown bear gene pool, it's just natural gene flow. It's the exact same speciation mechanism as Neanderthals and modern humans, not an actual extinction event. And here comes that deeply subversive punchline. Structurally, the pitch argues that preferring a white-furred variant over its genetically identical brown relative isn't science at all. It's purely an aesthetic bias. They literally equate the desire for polar bear preservation with white extinctionist rhetoric. They are directly weaponizing the biological concept of gene flow against standard conservation narratives. And the pitch certainly doesn't stop there. They use this exact same objective structure, leveraging strict physiological and MRI data, to aggressively challenge other modern social narratives. For instance, they cite published research in lactation journals regarding oxytocin-mediated arousal during infant suckling, and then use that biological data to draw highly provocative diagnostic parallels to pedophilia. Whether you agree with the framing or not, you can clearly see how they systematically deploy uncomfortable, peer-reviewed data to construct these intensely controversial arguments. So as we wrap up this explainer, we really have to take a step back and look at the overall strategy of Genomics Publishing Group. They've undeniably built a fascinating, almost brutal machine for delivering raw data. But it leaves us with a massive question. Does weaponizing data through pedagogical aggression actually create a more informed, science-literate public? Or does it just alienate people who are looking for genuine understanding, effectively replacing one form of institutional dogma with a cynical, aggressive new one? It's a provocative question that, just like their data, is definitely meant to leave you a little uncomfortable.